Good morning, everybody. Clearly a can't-miss panel, particularly given today's date. What I thought first might be good just to set the context is why don't each of you just briefly either talk about your company or the role that you play. So Rand, just quickly.
Sure. So I'm the CEO of SNIPS. We build private by design, open source, decentralized voice assistants. Think of us as the exact opposite of Amazon Alexa, effectively.
Okay. Jerry, your role?
About IBM?
Yes.
About IBM and my role, about GDPR, my role in France and also around the market, GDPR market, is to help different organizations to supply services and different technology to help organizations to go to be compliant.
Okay. Excellent. And Alain?
Good morning, Lisa. I'm heading a company called WEBORAMA. WEBORAMA is applying natural language processing and AI to better understand content in order to build a scientific consumer knowledge.
Excellent. So I think we have a great mix here in terms of technology, in terms of helping process and approach to compliance, as well as consumers. So why don't we jump right in? And again, I'll start with you, Rand. People tend to focus on thinking of the challenges with GDPR. So let's start from there. And what do you see from your perspective of what the biggest challenges are in terms of the regulation?
I think in general, it's a question of mindset. Privacy is not really something you can add on top of a product or service you're building. It's actually something you have to think about by design. When I was reading all of those emails that people sent around saying, this is our plan for GDPR compliance, I thought to myself, well, we don't have a plan at SNIPS, not because we don't care, but because we never had to care because we've been private by design from the first day. So I think you really need to think about changing completely the business model and the way you build products to make sure you're compliant, and that's the biggest challenge. The regulation part is easy to solve from a legal perspective. The mindset is hard to change.
Yeah, very interesting. So Thierry, from your perspective, you guys have talked to a lot of companies out there in terms of their approach to compliance and how they're thinking about it. What have you seen in terms of challenges?
Yes, I visited around 1,000 companies in France and around the world for 2 years. And I think it's a revolution because some companies continue and will be a key differentiator to put on the market. And I think some companies, other companies, will close because it's a very disruptive new model. For 2 years, we speak about this date, the 25th of May, today, but it's, for me, the end of the beginning. It's a new period. And we published last week in IBM a survey. We consult around 1,500 companies around the world. On 44 countries, and we consult high-level, top-level management and GDPR leader. And it's very interesting to have some paradox on GDPR. 59% of the high-level CEO management say, oh, it's an opportunity for us to change. For changing the organization, to have more data quality, for changing all the procedures, the process, the security, to reinforce the security also. But the paradox is that today, when we say to the company, you will fully compliant, they say no. Around 36% of the panels say we will be compliant. And it's around the world. I think in France and in Europe it will be less. So it's a new step today. I think it's a long journey for company, but it's a step to have a more key differentiator. And we separate two type of company. The sparked, the leader, and the squeezed. The sparked, the leader, are the people who understood that compliance is only a step. And they have the objective to be fully compliant very quickly, to manage the data, to have a more secure data, and to supply other managed services to the company.
Yep.
It's very interesting to have the two separate reaction of
Right.
of the high-level management.
Yep. Alain, how about from your perspective on challenges and maybe a bit of the voice of the consumer?
Well, first of all, I think that GDPR entails certain legal constraints that you have to cope with and certain organization constraints. So, for example, at WEBORAMA, we had, and I think it's common sense here, but we had to nominate a chief a data protection officer. We had to put in place the registry of all the data processing that we had. We did our own data protection impact assessment and the legitimate impact assessment, and we subscribe to. So it's a lot of things
Right.
to be compliant with the law. But one important thing is that GDPR is only half of the way, because it's what concerns the data processing. It's not really what concerns the consumer and the user, because this is more covered by the other part, which is e-privacy. And originally, the two legislations were supposed to come on the same day,
Right.
which was today, and which
Right.
was great, because we had everything in hand. But it's not the case, because we only have one half of the puzzle. So there's a lot of challenges here, which is making this opportunity, which is huge. For Europe, it's a huge opportunity,
Yeah.
which is setting the ground for a better, a more ethical data environment. And this is the most important sustainable growth question of our industry. But there are so many, because until now we worked with directives, okay? So the EU was saying this is the direction, and each country was translating this into a law. This is the first time that we have a law that is applied to all Europe, and this is very powerful, because this means that whether US companies, Asian companies want to work in Europe, they have to take this into account. Now we need to make sure, and this is a collective effort that we need to do, that those companies are not the ones that are going to put the rules in place.
Yeah. And I think about, if we think about actually the world that Mark just shared in terms of reinventing marketing and it's important and its role going forward, what goes with that is the trust, right? To be able to use that data in the right way. You know, a lot of people have talked about, you know, the consumer, and actually, Rand, I'd like to go back to some of what you said, which is a mindset approach, right? And it's very different from all the process that needs to be a part of it and everything. But the consumers, you know, they're all being flooded right now, right, with emails from companies and click the box here and check this. I know on my social media, all these people are saying, why am I getting all these emails today?
You receive for two days many emails.
Many. So how do you think consumers think about privacy? Do they know how much privacy they want? I mean, people just sort of say consumers want privacy. Do they actually know how much privacy they want? Do they know how to think about all these boxes they're checking right now?
So that's a good question. How many people here actually care about privacy? Like, do something about it? Okay, so not everyone. Do you mind if we do a small experiment? So
Let's do it. Let's do it, right? Let's make GDPR exciting.
So everybody, but it only really works if you actually do it, okay? So everybody take out your phone. You too. Take out your phone, unlock it, okay? And I want you to open the last conversation you had. It doesn't matter which messaging app. Any messaging app, just open the last conversation you had on your phone. Now I want you to give your phone to your neighbor.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't bring my phone up, sorry.
Come on, pass it on to your neighbor. See how that feels. So you see, this is exactly what's happening when you're ticking that OK box without actually knowing what's going on. And that's the biggest issue, is that it's something that's very tangible when you see it like this, but it's very hard for people to realize when they're just clicking a terms and condition box.
Yeah.
So like, you know, in the same way that you don't feel good about giving someone access to your phone that's completely unlocked, you shouldn't feel good about giving a company access all of your personal data without knowing what's going to happen behind.
And excellent point. I love the experiment. I think that's great. How do you think consumers will educate themselves on how to think about this? Or how will they learn how to think about this?
I'm really hoping that eventually people will not have to care.
Right.
Not because it doesn't matter, but because privacy will be guaranteed by default by everyone.
Right.
Right? It shouldn't be something people actively pursue. It should be something companies actively offer.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thierry, do you have some thoughts there?
I think the journey will be very long because for educate people. But some scandal like Facebook and Cambridge Analytica are very interesting to educate people because the people understood that it's possible to catch data, to analyze data, to know what is your point of view about political aspect, and to give you some message by video and to orient your way to vote. It's a great advertising for GDPR in Europe, the Facebook scandal.
Alain?
I think when you look at privacy questions, you have two aspects in the individual. One is the citizen, one is the consumer. Mm-hmm. We're talking a lot about the consumer, and I think privacy is much less an issue for consumer. Okay. For citizen, I think, and the experience you had round is about the citizen. You don't want to share your inner things. But I think consumer-wise, it's a bit different, and we're ready to do much more. And concerning the relationship to brands, to content, I think we're happy to have ads and content that is relevant to us, rather than something which is, the retargeting approach, really heavy, really hard on us. So, and GDPR is in a way aiming at making this distinction, giving different approaches to the way you handle data when you talk about the citizen and talking about the consumer. And I think this is a major issue for the industry and for us as citizens.
But I think everybody agrees that it's better to have a better service. I think the method in which you're offering that is really what should change. Today you have more and more technologies which enable this type of personalization and machine learning to actually work without actually accessing the personal data of the user. You can use, things like secure computation, homomorphic encryption starting to work pretty well. You can actually run a lot of that computation on the device that people are currently using. And so it's just a way of thinking about privacy. The end goal can be the same, but you can actually still protect privacy of people in the meantime. And I think this is the big challenge at the moment.
Yes, I agree. The key point is the accuracy of the data. We have the good data. We know where is located the data inside the company, and we have the opportunity and the obligation to protect this data. And the technology are not novelty. It's an accelerator to help people to be compliant. And we have some huge stream on technology. The first stream is to explore different data. In major company, you have data in many space, database, mail, servers, and the major company don't know really where is the data. They know, of course, the major data in the major application, the business application. Mm-hmm. But the first focus for the huge company, and we have seen also this key point in the survey, is that to discovery, the data discovery. Data discovery inside the company, inside the IT system, and its IT transformation. Because we have to know where are the data to introduce the protection of the data. The second aspect, of course, when you have the data, you localize the data, you, for example, have data dictionary. The key point is, of course, to have different tools to protect data, or to manage the retention of the data. Because in GDPR, you have to keep only the data you need.
Right.
So you have also to destroy data. It's a revolution for company, because the political now inside company is to keep all data. So you have also the huge point also of the future of big data, because it's a side where a place where we have many data, and
right.
you have to control, of course, the personal data inside big data.
Yep. And to stick with the technology a bit, Brandon, I know you're a fan of this, and I had a question come in with the audience that also focused on something Satya Nadella said yesterday, which is that they're working on tools that can unbiased data from where the AI models are training them. So, and that becomes very interesting when you think about data again and people. So how do you think some of these approaches and trying to take bias out of it may impact some of the growth of artificial intelligence and the use of that in this space?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the first thing is that bias is inherently biased in how you interpret what a bias is, right? It's a very human judgment.
Right.
Something that seems biased today might not have been a few years ago. Something that's biased for a specific use case is actually something another company might actually want. Mm-hmm. I'll give a specific example. When you're working on things like voice assistants, right, so talking to machines, the first thing you need to do is essentially model language as numbers. And the way that people do that is that they use Wikipedia typically as a source of language and use the relationship between words as a way to convert words into numbers. What they found out is that when you look at the most often associated profession for men, it says lawyer. When you look at the most associated profession for women, can you guess?
Housewife?
Housewife. And so now imagine for a second that you're building an AI assistant that is supposed to help people make a career choice,
right,
or helping them choose an education. Like, you might have built the best tool on the planet. You're like, it might actually make that sort of bias even worse because it's inside the algorithm's basic data. And so the way that you can solve that problem is not through technology, because there is no interpretation of what that means. It's rather by, for example, asking humans to look at the data and asking them, is that biased?
Yeah.
And then a human can then correct those biases according to what makes sense. But this, of course, is an iterative process. It's not something that you can algorithmically do on a massive scale. You got to do it like little by little. So I think we need to accept that there will be biases in AI, and we just need to make sure that we detect them, that we can fix them.
Yep. Which also underscores that as much as there's technology and data, we still need people and human eyes on things to make sure we apply it the right way.
I mean, it's like people think of machines as being completely autonomous, but that's like just fantasy. The truth is that 90% of machine learning today requires data that has been annotated by humans in the first place. Mm-hmm. So like there is inherently human involved in every single AI system at the moment.
So actually I've got, so thank you, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I got another question that has just come in, which I think is interesting and a different pivot on this. There's some notion that that what GDPR is obviously going to look to put in place, that some companies could go out of business because of this. And then there's also a question here in terms of, is it actually an opportunity for smaller companies that could be more agile versus some of the big companies, and clearly some of the big tech companies who sit on a lot of the data. So Alain, would you like to start with there?
Yeah. I really wish. I think it's not the case, and it's going to be very hard for smaller players. You want to start a company today in this environment, the first 5 million you're going to raise will be to be compliant with all the different legal approaches, security approaches that you have to be fully compliant with GDPR. On the other side, you have Google, Facebook, and those companies who are making the most out of this regulation. I'm not sure that was the intention, the initial intention from the regulator, but what's happening is that in the end, the companies that are in the best position to get consent from the user are those guys, and they're stronger than ever. And when I started my first company, we used to hear a lot that that trees don't climb to the sky. Well, it seems that some walls do climb to the sky, and there's nothing to stop them. And I think it's a major issue because the answer is in the room, because that's only you CMOs that can change these dynamics. Mark Pritchard just said something that went directly in this direction, which is excellent, and I hope that collectively, and it's only collectively, that we can face this huge threat, in my opinion. And e-privacy is going to be a key. If we go to the explicit consent, which is a legal point, but which is something that looks nice, but which actually is a threat to the industry. So we need to fight this.
I'm not sure I actually agree with what you said. I'm really sorry, but I think it's actually, in fact, easier for new companies and smaller companies to be compliant because they have less legacy and data to deal with. If anything, for a company that's from the 90s, from the internet, like 1990s internet, to be compliant requires changing a business model they've been building on for 20 years. For a new company who wants to start today, they've literally have nothing that they have to deal with from before. And creating privacy and being compliant, again, if you're trying to build a company thinking like people are thinking 20 years ago, it's not going to work. If you're trying to build a company today with a modern thinking on privacy, it's super easy. And so, I feel a lot of people talk about GDPR as a hindrance. That's the same speech we've had about the CNIL, in France, supposedly preventing companies from doing innovation, but it has never actually been the case. Like, in fact, every time there was a new privacy regulation, it enabled new players to offer a new way of doing business with new products that were more respectful, and that was beneficial for everybody. I just haven't heard of any company that could not be created because of GDPR. And all the companies that are shutting down are companies that, quite frankly, should shut down because they're just abusing people's data.
Yes, for smaller companies, it's not very easy because some cases they need legal advice, and it's a huge project for GDPR. But my advice.
If you start from scratch, it's not a big deal. It's expensive when you've got a lot of legacy to deal with. It's really nothing when you're starting today. Really, like I've known so many companies that are looking at it right now. It's really not that much of a big deal.
For smaller company, my advice is to integrate all the main principle of GDPR. And to prepare the future, the main principle are the consent, of course, the right, the access right for citizens, and to have a good security aspect on the data. But it's not the same projects on smaller company and huge company. For huge company. For a major company, you have a need of collaboration very, very important, because in a huge company we talk about people. It's very important to have training, to have a change management challenge. It's a real change management challenge for major company, because we have many people we have to change in some time the culture of the data privacy inside the company, because some people collect or have some process on data, and we have to train them around the way to collect and process the data. So when you follow some major company on the GDPR program, we describe the 5 levels. The governance, it's very important to have a top level engagement of the company. You have the communication, the education of all people. I think it's a more effort. You have a major effort on the education, on the training of people to change the culture in some company. You have, of course, a different process because you have many processes where change. For example, I'll talk about the different suppliers. You have some data. You have some data, but your supplier will outsourcing your data. You need to change your legal contract. You need to control that this supplier is also compliant. You have a major contract review for all your suppliers. So the process is also many activities to do in the company. And of course, you have the data level and the security level. For the data level in a company, it's very important to know where you collect data and how many data you collect and where are the data. So it's interesting and exciting project because you have a mastered way to collect data and to propose data to your customer,
But actually,
to your consumer.
I think it's interesting because this conversation is really sort of demonstrating 2 ends of the spectrum. So there's the mindset that this is legislation, there's compliance, and that takes you to the negative space and the things that I have to put in place and the cost of that. But the other side is what is it there for? What is the benefit that it's there for? And how do I approach making that benefit real by a mindset and by design, right? And I think that's what we're seeing here is sort of 2 ends of the spectrum and how to get to the right place.
I mean, from the user, like the consumer perspective, obviously there is more privacy, more protection against abuses. You know, what we've seen in history is every single time we gave people personal data, they've used it to do great things at the beginning, but every time we didn't control what happened next, there was an abuse. Like every single time. I'll give you an example. Census, population census. When people introduced that a few hundred years ago, it was great because for the first time we started understanding dynamics of population, which led to understanding that there was a lot of issues around health because of the water treatment. And so that eventually led to the creation of the modern sewage system. So you're like, great, people actually gave personal data about their lives, which enabled us to have this great innovation, which is, clean water effectively. But what happened then? All of this data was just sitting in government's files, and it became used and abused to target people. For example, the Second World War in France, those same census files were used to actually target Jews and Roms and actually help deport them. So there's always an abuse in the future when you don't actually deal with the data after you've collected it. From the company's perspective today, I think the biggest advantage of GDPR comes with the data portability, in fact. Like when you think about it, most of the data that is valuable today is locked in American giant companies. As a European small player, you have no way to access that. But thanks to GDPR today, users can actually take their data from Google, from Facebook, from Amazon, and give it to a new player that's coming on the market. And that, I think, is a major deal because if consumers are unhappy with a service the company is providing, they can take their data and go somewhere else.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think that so many people are focused on the tech giants getting bigger and more control and disintermediating, and they're not thinking about the fact that the consumers control their data, and they're going to decide what they're going to do with it. And I do believe they want a value exchange, right? And they are happy to do that. And that it's also the notion that marketers and companies, and as Mark talked about, they're taking control of their data and saying, I don't need these other people to control my destiny. And I think that's for me, and I'd love to hear, and Alain, your thoughts. I think that's all the opportunity that exists here that people aren't focused on enough. Alain?
Yeah, well, I think two things. One analogy I like, and I think that the balance does exist between the consumer, the citizen, and the big tech companies. Think about the bees. The bees. They're so necessary to life because of their pollination, and if they stop, the danger is for the whole humanity. Okay? We are the bees by what we do every day. On the internet, by sharing, by posting, by putting pictures and so on. If this value is undermined and taken by a few players, that will change our behavior, and that will change the value that is created collectively. So this is point one. When we go back to business and to companies, what's so important in the years to come in the ability to corporation to build data goodwill, which is refine and improve their relationship with their consumers, and this is based on data, and we need to and GDPR and e-privacy are putting a framework that, if well organized and if we fight to the end, so that we make sure that e-privacy doesn't go off the track, could be a very precious environment to do just this.
And do you guys feel that this will then expand, over to the US, this stronger approach that the EU is putting in place and the other rest of the world?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you think about it, the fact that any company anywhere in the world has to be compliant to offer their services to a European resident effectively means that, so from a technical perspective, financial perspective, you're not going to have two products. Right? If you're going to make the effort of being GDPR compliant, it's just easier to just do it. You know what I mean? And we've seen this with Facebook. We've seen this with a lot of big companies. So in fact, I think that this is a great way for Europe to export some of its, ethical ideas and culture to the rest of the world, effectively forcing people to move one step a little bit closer to something that we've cared about forever here, privacy.
All right, so we're getting towards the end here, and I'm sure everyone could go on for hours and hours. But I guess what I'd like to do here at the end is go through each one of you guys and say, okay, what are the top two things that people should think about, regardless of whether they're a marketer or a consumer base of tech? Top two things to think about now, coming out of here, about GDPR. How should they think about it? Top two things.
So, number one, data portability is a huge opportunity. I really encourage you to think about what you can do now with that. And the second thing is, you shouldn't think of this as a legal thing. You should think of this as a mindset thing. And you should think about building products which are private by design. Privacy is not something you slap on top of, it's something you build when you think about a product.
Thierry, and then Alain?
My advice on GDPR is only three.
Sorry, only two.
Only two. I think the first advice for consumer, but for more for company, because my job is to help company.
Yeah.
And my first advice is to have a leadership of the top level. If it's only a compliance project, it will be a problem. So the second advice is after the compliance, think about what do you do with the data. And you could propose new services to the market. For example, today, we see some company who are not in the data services. We think about how they could manage data and help their own customer to be compliant. It will be interesting because it's a disruptive way to say, I have experience on GDPR, I can help my home customer to be compliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a disruptive way because it's a competition between a new operator on the market.
Excellent. All right, Alain, bring us home.
I think the first point is, okay, GDPR, for companies that have been thinking about privacy and concerned about privacy for a long time, GDPR is only one point in the history. We'll know, and this is the second point, if it's making a real difference, if the global thing, including GDPR plus privacy, is going in the right direction.
Excellent, thank you. And gentlemen,
Thank you.
thank you so much. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that.